Is that yours? Where did that come from? It was just using it as the folder. Nothing too exciting. I'm just trying to find the agenda. I haven't had a copy for it.
Yeah, too.
Doing that as well. This is second.
Okay, so everyone set?
Yes, still ready to go.
Okay. So,
So I declare the meeting open and the recording has started, so the
hang on, it's not your meeting. So there's a recording officer. I'll declare the meeting open.
I think we've got to start the ordinary meeting first.
There is no ordinary meeting. The meeting is the special meeting for the purposes of voting for and nominating a chairperson. So,
Oh, yeah.
okay, so we have two nominations, one being for Councillor Robinson, the other being for Councillor Kermode. And which is duly noted, and the method of voting shall be by the normal method of a show of hands, unless anyone, as we have two people, if anyone wants to vote differently. Seems a bit silly that only one of us. Both of you. Yes. Okay, let's stick. No, I realise 5 people voting for a particular person.
Oh, they said you vote for themselves.
Yes, okay. Okay, so shall we put it to the vote? This is a 5-minute exercise, so let's
Comments? You want to say goodbye? Do you want, what do you want? Are they accepting the nomination?
I think if nobody's objecting to show of hands, well then the show of hands is the that was the recommendation.
yeah.
Have to
And I said there was nominations for Councillor Robinson and Councillor Kermode, so I'm assuming they were accepted because no one said I object to those nominations. Yep. The fly can vote.
well, you don't vote them. So all well, I'm not sure. So,
No, I'm just saying that the method of voting should be by a show of hands, and should we put it to the vote? Should we vote for Councillor Kermode first? So I've got one vote for Councillor Kermode. Okay. So unless 5 other people abstain, could we have a show of hands for Councillor Robinson? Okay.
Congratulations.
thank you.
Commiserations.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yep.
So your hands.
Congratulations.
I support.
So the only other things are that transfer the meeting to the new chair and other matters of urgency. I'd just like to congratulate. Sorry,
Yeah, the deputy.
Deputy remains in place. There's no need to elect a new deputy. Unless you can resign.
Okay.
You can resign.
You can resign, in which case we'd have to vote for a, well, we don't have to, so then we'd have to have a vote to say, do we want to have a deputy? Because we don't have to have one. So we can operate without a deputy, or.
Look, I don't think you can operate without a deputy, to be honest with you.
So in practical terms, you can't.
Reluctantly, I'll stay.
Okay, there you go. Well, you are both therefore nominated to the 14th of September 24, because it's a 1-year because remember the funny election at the end of the year. So the elections come back into line on the 14th of September 24. So congratulations to you both. And congratulations to Councillor Robinson.
Thank you.
I won't say commiserations. I don't think that's too many commiseration. Yes, so at that stage, I hand over the meeting to the new chair.
Thank you. Well, the next item on the agenda is matters of urgency. Now, do we have any matters of urgency? Yes,
Richard, we are in receipt of the engagement, office engagement plan. And as a matter of urgency, I believe that we should have a discussion with the general manager over item 3, the internal control environment, which the auditors have, will provide an opportunity for the general manager to be open about the audit engagement letter and the matters contained therein, in particular their concerns around the internal control environment and how the general manager plans to address that.
thank you. Would you like me to call for a vote to suspend standing orders so we can have a free discussion? Does anybody want?
Remembering that I'm happy to move that way, but we're still on recording, so
Yeah, or we could go into closed session if you like.
I think there's justification for it.
So we've got one, you're going to move to suspend.
Second.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we'll take a vote on suspending standing order. All in favour? Aye. Okay, would the general manager and chief financial officer like to comment on the audit engagement matter?
Yeah, not passing the buck immediately, but as Laurie's been the person knee deep and dealing on a daily basis with both sides in the audit office, it'd probably be useful for Laurie to give a bit of background, because you sort of the letter jumps in at the middle to say we have the following concerns, but what it does ignore totally is how we got to that point. So that might be useful. Perhaps not surprising, but useful to hear.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to everyone. Probably back to, let's say, the end of financial year 21-22, which was now 18 months ago, thereabouts, is when I became first involved, as you would know. That's when I started to appear at council meetings. And my task at that point in time, through my business, was to prepare the end of the financials, which we did at very short notice. And during that process of getting to the point where the audit office eventually signed off on that in February of this year, we spent significant time going back over records, and you might recall, and I think I've written it in my reports to the council meetings on those particular occasions when the financial statements were being discussed and presented, that there were significant shortfalls in the records that were available to us to prepare the financials. And through a process of working with the then contracted bookkeepers through Robertson Morrow, we were able to find sufficient substantiation for the documents that related to the financials, and the audit was eventually signed off by the audit office. Now that was in the period through to, you might remember we got an extension from LLG for that. That was in the period to the end of January or thereabouts. Coincidentally, at the same time, through the general manager, the staffing situation attempted to be addressed, and we engaged a officer in the name of Emma Dunn to commence the internal bookkeeping work and take the handover from Robertson Morrow, which occurred from January through to her departure in May. My business was involved up to the point of doing preparatory work for the financials, doing the budget review statements, and assisting with the changeover from MyOb to Zero in that period of time, which occurred in early April.
So the MyOb transfers happened during Emma Dunn's time
Yes.
here as a bookkeeper.
Yes.
Hmm.
So from her engagement in January, there was a transfer of responsibility from the contract bookkeepers, Robertson Morrow, to Emma. And we did not, personally, our business did not have the day-to-day oversight of what was happening in the business at that point in time. What we had engagement with was doing the financial reconciliations for the changeover from MyOb to Zero, leading up to the end of March and early April. And that involved obviously taking balances out of MyOb, reconciling them, bringing them into the new system, and just generally supervising the oversight of that.
And that's what is now mentioned. Sorry to interrupt, but I think we'll probably all that's what's mentioned in the engagement plan.
Yes,
They want to double check.
and that's natural. That's part of the process. I've been through that with many other councils, and when you do a system changeover, it's obviously a target for audit review to make sure you've got all the systems right and the balances coming across correctly and all those sort of things. So nothing unusual about that. Step forward to early May, when Emma resigned at very short notice. We then were asked by the general manager to assist in the day-to-day operations, such as producing payroll, paying creditors and so on. And that was from the period of May onwards. And as we started to work through that process, leading into the end of financial year, they have an interim audit, end of year audit. So the councils have two audits per year. One is called an interim and one's called an end of year. An interim audit through Forsyth was conducted in late June. So the period from May to June, a very short space of time, we started to gather information to support the requests from the auditors. And we discovered that much of the, or not much, but quite a lot of the information that related to payments, particularly in the period leading up to January through Robertson Morrow, simply were not available. So they were not keeping copies of invoices and receipts and so on to attach to MyOb records. Now, I wasn't engaged in the transfer between Robertson Morrow and Emma, but we have and continue to find holes in the work that Emma had done. No pun intended. No pun intended. To then launch into the interim audit and straight away into the end of financial year audit. The auditors had raised concerns about the lack of supporting information, which started back in the period during Robertson Morrow and obviously continued during the employment of Miss Dunn.
So that relates to this financial year that's now the subject of that engagement plan.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality was it was in existence well before that. It was in existence in the previous financial year.
What was in
It's
it?
just the lack of controls, lack of supporting information concerning invoice processing and so But it wasn't at that time raised by the auditor, so it wasn't a red flag for anyone to follow through. So it's during the course of this financial year that auditors stepping in to do their normal work have identified or have requested certain samples of documents, which they always do. And as we were able to provide much of that, there were gaps in that information that we could not provide because we did not have copies of invoices. Since that time, and leading up until just recently, much of those documentations that were not identified at the time have been found and have been provided to the auditors. Now, they were attached to various emails. They were attached to records that we were able to provide from the suppliers. But the context of that is that the concern was initially over the lack of supporting information through transactions. And as much of the transactions are done electronically, including through Visa cards or credit cards, it is not a simple task to obtain copies of that information when you go searching for it. Having said that, we have located most of that information. So the auditors now have in their possession much of the substantiating information that they had requested through investigation on everybody's part, through the general manager, through our team, and through searching the records by staff. We're able to come up with lots of that information.
So what's outstanding?
There's probably a handful of invoices that we haven't yet been able to trace. They're not large amounts of money. They're quite small amounts of money in the context of the business for NEWA. But because they have been raised by the auditors, we have an obligation to at least try and find that substantiation, and we continue to do that. But there's not a lot of this. I don't know the number, but it will be less than 20.
Yeah.
And it's less than $12,000. So to put it into context, we're not talking about the a large amount of money. There's 20 documents that add up to $12,000, but they will be found. I mean, we started off with a significant number of supporting documents that are being requested, because what happened is logically we get bills of things here. They were emailed to Robertson Morrow. Robertson Morrow had a change of staff as well to complicate things. So I forget Angela was the first person, and she left and the changed over to Liv Steele. The problem being that as we were sending documentation to Robertson Morrow, perhaps where we were at fault was we made the assumption that chartered accountants would keep what's known as supporting documentation, would keep the supporting documents, but they didn't. They processed them and they disappeared. But what we were able to do is to go back through those various emails and say, okay, I sent you a Telstra bill on this day, or I sent you that on another day.
So you would have sent that scanned Telstra. You're getting, just say it's a Telstra bill.
Yeah.
I know what they are.
Yeah. Well, in the case of the Telstra bill, we just went back to Telstra and said, can you give us your June bill? So those fees, Ampol, Telstra, Essential Energy, all of those were fairly easy. What were more difficult were the invoice where someone bought a tool or 20 litres of Grazon or something like that. And even more difficult, as Laurie says, is when someone uses a credit card. It's just like when you use your credit cards, you get a statement and it says, McDonald's $12.
Yeah.
But if someone actually said, have you got an invoice for what that $12 was for? It was for 3 Big Macs and chips. And
No one makes those dockets. I know for the fact that at Great you've got to insist on documentary evidence of purchase.
However,
we routinely don't give it to you.
Yeah, but we have located all of those documents with some considerable effort, I might say, and we spent a lot of time and a lot of people. So we divided it up because purchases were being made by various staff members. So we could tell from the item that that purchase was made by Josh Robb or that purchase was made by Mandy Craig, because it was for accommodation at where they were going lead spraying or whatever. So we divided it up amongst the troops, and everyone had a list of 20, 30, 40, 50 documents they needed to find.
So you're working off your statement?
No, we're actually working out of the financial records, because the financial records were, I'll say, were largely correct. I mean, they were correct. So it wasn't a case of, you know, A plus B didn't equal C. It is show us a copy of A, show us a copy of B to arrive at C sort of thing. So we were working from the transactions to say, okay, but we need to see the documents from which those transactions were processed. And when we went back to Robertson Morrow, and there's some considerable liability on their part, but that's not something we're really interested in. But when we went back, the documents just weren't there.
But aren't you by law supposed to keep these records for 5 years or something?
Yes, yes, and it's not as if they weren't kept, they just weren't attached to the.
Yeah, but the accountant should know that.
That's what we thought. So what we, and just to continue on from where Tim was, part of the problem was that when the initial engagement with Robertson Morrow occurred, it's before my time, but I've since learned that Angela is the person charged with responsibility for that. And there was some form of training as to how NEWA costs were to be allocated within the MyOb system. So as you would know from your own accounting records, you have a general ledger, and that general ledger contains X number of accounts and different structures and so on. And every time a payment is made or a wages cost is done, it gets costed to a particular ledger account. In the initial days, that was done very well. But in the transfer of information within Robertson Morrow during the time other staff were involved, that dropped off considerably. So things were being costed to the wrong holes. As we came to do the financials, we go through them as we normally do, and we could see that doesn't look right. We go and investigate. Okay, that doesn't belong there. That belongs over here. So there's a whole bunch of things associated with movement of accounts, movement within the accounts.
Which is probably December before, from prior to December 2020.
Yes, that's right. But it continued on, and part of the process, so you might recall, we started to raise the need to have a better internal financial system. Certainly early in my time, it was well before Christmas last year, and we talked about, the general manager advised that we were going to move to Xero as an accounting system, which did happen.
For precisely this reason. So we had identified the risk. We thought engaging a firm of chartered accountants would put the finger in the dike, so to speak, would hold the fort until we migrated to Xero. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So the migration to Xero was the right solution. Boldly, I would say that I don't think we've had any issues since we moved over to Xero on the 31st of March.
We should put the controls in place that should be in place.
What are they? I'm not convinced with this element. So what are controls in place? Because I'm trying to say, sorry, I'm going to interject here, because you don't employ chartered accountants to get your coding right. That's about someone saying this expenditure is to go here, and they go and type it in the right place and make the payment or otherwise. You can't ask a chartered accounting firm to code your activities. They're not out in the field with you and they don't know it. I've had every control, everything that I've done was there's control stamp or otherwise. In the old days when we had paper, the stamp would go on here and they'd say this cost centre and this account code, and send it to the accounts department. I'm sorry, I'm doing it to send to the accounts department to process, and that's where it would get coded to. This is a set and forget model, or give away and let it go. It's not fair to them, And it's only fair on the revision of segregation of duties, which is an issue, and also that double checking of what's going on. So the accounts person sends it off, and then it's up to a general manager or another manager or a finance person to say, yes, I've scrubbed the accounts, they look right, everything's in the right hole. I do not prescribe at all to sending, and that documentation, if you send it to accountant to process it, it's your getting audited, not the financial, not the accounting crew. You need to have the documentation in a folder, electronically scanned or otherwise to support it when it came into the ledger here. Laurie, I'm not convinced, and I won't satisfy it. And every person, every time I go to Grey's Act, they say, do you want to have, do you need a tax invoice? And I say, yes, please, I'll take one of those with me. I go to McDonald's and I get my things for my meal, and I've got to register who's taken the debit card out and for what reason. We did that policy, and we were assured that there was a whole bunch of processes and procedures in place to make sure that we wouldn't have exactly what's been reported back to us. Even in my, it's not a reflection of my company, but I had a register, if someone wants to go down shops and get something, Miss Lily takes the card, this is the reason I'm going for it, and it comes back with the receipt. It's a process, it's a procedure. And what they're saying here, and you know from auditing, is that they try to look at the compliance testing, they do their compliance testing first. Are the delegations in place? Is the policy being followed? The segregation of duties there? Do the delegations get followed through from next person to next person? And what they've said here is we can't rely on that. So we've gone back to the substantive testing. Substantive testing is I have to follow the piece of document over through exactly what it is. And what they're saying, that's been wanting. Correct. So we can't rely on what you've got. And up to a point, to a point about whether who was doing it or not was doing it, this organisation has been in place for a while, right? So I'm not convinced. I'm going to expect through the bed that we understand what these controls are in place now, so that we get some level of comfort. Secondly, not going to sit here while we provide delegation, general manager to operate this show. And $12,000 might be laughed off as immaterial in separate accounts, but the fact is, there's a fact in I'm speaking, there are holes. There's holes in the controls, and therefore the risk of something catastrophic happening or unrecoverable happening is live and well.
Was live.
No, well, it is live and well until we're proven that it's not.
Just through the chair, Laurie and I and his staff have spent a huge amount of time very seriously dealing with a very significant problem. I find it quite offensive to have that described as being laughed off by saying, oh, it's only $12,000. I said it was immaterial, it was insignificant on the audit standard of significance. I didn't say it was funny or amusing. I also didn't say that we didn't obtain, you said when you go to Grey's Act, I always get an invoice, etc., etc. Yes, we obviously have an invoice because it was from those invoices that Liz Steele processed the transactions. What she didn't do, which was the control and which we had arranged and agreed with Robert Samaro, was that MYOB and Xero both have the facility where you capture the document at the time you process it. So you process the telephone account, but you attach a copy of the telephone bill as well. If we had that, then we would have exactly what was required by the auditors. The problem was that that documentation was not saved as it is now being saved in Xero. And that was the problem. So we had to go back. It wasn't that it didn't happen. It wasn't that it didn't exist, but we had to go back through our email records when the documents were transferred to Roberts and Morrow, or we had to go back to the supplier and say, look, on this particular day, you supplied us something for $4,000 odd. This is what it was. Can you please give us a copy invoice and things like that? So we made a conscious decision, or I made a conscious decision, which Laurie probably regretted at the time, that we were going to find everything that Forsyths were asking for, because when we produced everything that they were asking for, we addressed their substantive concern, because after we received that letter, we didn't just put it in the file.
The 18th of August.
The next day, we had a extended discussion with Forsyth, and we arranged that the day after that, so within 48 hours, we had an extended meeting with the audit office and with Forsyth to understand exactly what they were talking about. And when it boiled down to it, they said, yes, what we are concerned about is that we do not have the documentation that matches the transaction in the accounts. And we said, fine, we understand that. We know that that's an issue because it's an issue for us. We will find that documentation and provide it. And that's what we've been doing ever since.
And you just got, yes, and you're still going to find the remaining invoices and
Yes.
documentation.
Yes,
And have you any idea when that's likely to be achieved?
no.
No.
No, and I'm not saying no, that I have no idea. It's, I don't even, you don't know, because what it is it's an investigation. You say, oh, now we're looking for that. Okay, where might that be? And you look in various places. Some are easier than others. Some display a lack of understanding on the part of the auditors, because they're saying, oh, we're looking on the 12th of December for an invoice for $27,000.
There were quite a number of those items that they had listed. Actually, in the system, they just didn't know that
Yes,
they hadn't identified. So
yes,
in the wash up for providing all that information, they will come to
Yeah.
light. Just can I take up on
and can I just finish on that one point though?
Okay.
But that $27,000 that they were looking for on the 12th of December was in actual fact a batch payment that had been put through for 15 different invoices. So there was no invoice for $27,000. What there was 15 different invoices that added up to $27,000. So we then had to break down that payment and say, well, this is what it's made up of. Now, which one of these 15 invoices, or all 15, do you want? And they said, oh, okay, didn't understand that, because they didn't understand how ComBiz worked or what have you. So it's quite a investigatory
How do you do
process.
that without receipts?
Sorry,
How did you do that without having receipts?
we just go into the bank record and we explode that payment, because it'll break the payment out into the different companies that paid. And then it says, okay, on this day, there was this invoice for this amount. And then we know, we say, okay, we know who the supplier was, we know what the date was, we know what the amount was, and then we track it down from there. So it's a very time consuming process. I suppose it'd be fair to say on average an hour and a half per invoice, of which there are 260,
something like
270 of them. There's a lot of work. But at the end of the day, we have found, as I say, dare I say it again, all bar 20 documents and $12,000, and we are continuing. Laurie actually named me as recently as an hour ago to say, when are you going to get back on top of, this, because,
How long have that 20 or $12,000 was been missing? Not provided. They've been outstanding.
it's not really a case of outstanding. It's a case of, I think you start with the low hanging fruit and then you work the more and more difficult. A lot of those $12,000 are these ComBiz transactions, which are the more difficult.
There are also other ways which causes concern with the way RMT is processing things. I don't know whether any of you are familiar with MILE, but there is a process in MILE that allows you simply to take a balance out of the bank statement and put it to somewhere without any record whatsoever. It's called spend money or receive money.
Yeah.
That process is dangerous because it promotes the fact that you can just do that quickly to get things done,
Yeah.
but you never actually have the supporting information.
It's Friday afternoon.
That's true, lovely, but everyone knows that every account puts into a clearing account and someone's always nominated to look at those clearing accounts.
But they're not going into clearing accounts, Paul. They were going all over the place. And so can I say to you that when the task was handed to Robertson Morrow, you look out here, there was no one in the office to do all of that management. It was left to the general manager to do, as well as manage the business. The entire financial side of things was outsourced to Robertson Morrow. And when we came to pick things up, it certainly wasn't my responsibility to check day-to-day operations. That's not what I was engaged for. I was engaged to do the statutory accounting work. It only came about as we started to prepare for the migration to Xero that we started to see these things were causing us concern. And then one thing led to another. That was April. May, Emma left. June, we were doing the audits. And at the end of June, we were into end-of-year financials. So there was a cascading of issues that we had to deal with that were historical. And that in hindsight would have been wonderful if we'd have stepped in and done it earlier, but we had no knowledge of that being a problem. And so now we're in a position when we do have control, at least temporarily, until staff are appointed. Since the changeover to Xero, getting to your point, Paul, about controls, every time an invoice is or a charge is debited to a credit card or a bill arrives, it is supported by an invoice and it's attached to the general ledger account that's been attached to in Xero. There is not a single event where that has not occurred. There is controls over the processing payroll. That was another issue with Robertson Morrow. Payroll was outsourced to Robertson Morrow. That was all done separately. There is no segregation of duties in that. It was all handled by Robertson Morrow.
So how are the segregation of duties handled now?
Well, to the best extent possible, within my team, I have 3 people and one person does the payroll. Another person checks that before it's sent to the bank and Tim then authorises that. So there's 3 levels of intervention that did not occur prior to that. Every invoice is checked and matched and correctly allocated to the right GL account.
And just because I noticed Laurie didn't mention it, preceding every invoice being received is a purchase requisition is generated. That's a written formal document. It used to be a little duplicate book you just scribble in it. But that doesn't exist anymore. There's now a purchase requisition is made by person A, it is approved by person B. When the invoice comes in, it goes to person C to record that transaction, and person D approves payment of that transaction. So there's 4 different levels, and there's also 4 different pieces of documentation. And more than happy to take anyone through any bill and walk through the process and say, yes, there's the purchase requisition, there's the invoice, there's the processing, there's the payment, there's the transaction in Commonwealth Bank. It all flows through.
And not only has that been managed within our business, but it's also being worked through with every single staff member. So we've had workshops with staff to explain to them the importance of tracking records, the importance of keeping receipts, and they assisted us in identifying many of those outstanding receipts because they had them. They had
in their back pocket.
and sometimes in their back pocket, sometimes in an email, whatever. They had them. They just didn't understand the importance of it because they'd never been explained to.
Yeah.
So this is part of the evolution of getting better controls into the business. And we've taken big steps to do that.
Well, I don't understand, and I'm not an accountant, but I'm exposed to this in other business situations. Two things. One, why is the audit office making a fuss about or saying they don't see evidence of controls? And the second question is, why hasn't Emma been replaced by somebody? Because I don't think there's necessarily enough separation with, you know, you've got to set up, well, having person B and C as part of your business, Laurie, that's not very separate.
It's, as I said, it's as good as it can be at the moment because there's no one else.
But why can't we?
Well, that's in process now.
To replace them up.
Yes, and I just want to be fair to Laurie. Emma was not the answer to the prayer. Emma was a large part of the problem.
So you can't sit here now and dump Emma in it. So ultimately, you're responsible.
Yeah, that is.
No, ultimately the general manager is responsible. So I think it's unfair to dump Emma in. She's not here to defend herself. So
Yeah.
Ultimately,
Well, a matter of fact,
Yeah, well, it's probably outside the remit of this meeting.
there probably is.
Yeah.
So let's.
So the question was, we have been advertising for staff. As you would know, getting staff is exceptionally difficult.
Yeah.
We do have 38 applications for the finance and administration role. You can throw 30 of those out the window. You can take away the ones that live in Sri Lanka and Nepal and Vanuatu and who don't have visas, etc., etc. And at the moment, we're currently interviewing people who look reasonable.
Okay, so that's that one. So the other question is.
And we are looking for biosecurity officers and we are looking for weed spray officers as well. But it is a very, very, very difficult market. And I talked to DPI and I talked to LLS about it, and they were quite amazed when they heard that we got, I think it was better part of 60 applications for biosecurity officers. Again, you know, they have to go to everybody else.
Okay, so the first part of my question was, there seems to be a gap between the audit engagement plan and what you're saying in terms of current internal controls.
Well,
It's not an allegation, it's just.
No, not quite as much of a gap as you think. But this is why we so very quickly had a discussion with the audit office to say, what are you actually saying? You know, spell it out, boil it down. And it really boiled down to when our juniors went and asked for a bit of paper, they didn't get it as quickly as they wanted it.
Sorry.
The auditors.
The audit juniors.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we're talking about juniors, and they said and more than happy to put up on the screen the actual portal of what they send us. They just send us spreadsheets of line after line after line after line. We want this, we want this, we want this, we want this. And because that didn't come back quickly, remembering that there was 5 people doing the audit and there was 1 person responding to the 5 people, it's a lot easier to ask questions than it is to get answers. And so when we actually said, what are we really talking about? What are you looking for? What do we need to do? It boiled down to we basically have to produce this documentation. And so I said, well, if that's what it is, we'll produce the documentation. All things are possible. The only thing is time and cost.
That's in relation to document production and all that. And I realise it can be really frustrating and all that, but they're also saying that there are inadequate controls now.
No, they're not.
No, they're not.
No, they're not. They're saying that when they started to look at the records, there were inadequate controls in place, and we have to agree. That's true. No argument about that. What they have acknowledged is that since that changeover has happened, controls are in place.
So post-May.
Yes. Yes.
It's the implementation of Zero,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
really what makes the difference. Prior to Zero, it happened. When we implemented Zero together with all its controls, then that substantially addressed the issue. What it didn't address was the lack of staff complying with those controls.
And
So it's just, what they're looking at is historical information. It's concern of them because it's within this current financial year in which they're doing the audit. So they're looking at it and they're saying, well, here's 9 months or whatever it is of issues that we've identified relating to lack of substantial information. And that is enough to raise the concern in that engagement letter. What they have acknowledged when the conversation was held with the audit office and Forsyths, that they can identify that controls at more appropriate controls are in place, certainly not perfect controls because we don't have the staff to do it.
Start to do it.
But there has been a substantial level of increase in the amount of controls in place and continue to. So the other issue that I think I feel I need to mention, my business was engaged by Tim to do this at very short notice. I deal with 7 other councils doing similar things at the same time. I'm working probably 18 hours a day in some cases. We work a hell of a lot of hours to get this audit process through, because the audit starts in June and usually ends in mid-October by the time of lodging with LLG. So I'm managing those 7 councils. In that period of time, I delivered the end of year financial statements in draft to the auditors, as you well know, because it was presented to the meeting on the 15th of August. The auditors have had that information since the week prior to that. And their view was that they were not able to start auditing that until they had resolved their concern over controls. We have now provided most of the information they were looking for, so hopefully they will be able to go and finish the financial statements and then get to the point where they're happy to sign off on the statements as being a proper reflection of NEWA's business. So we're in that process now, and I'm managing that through with the audit office and with Forsyths.
And do you think you'll be able to meet the 31st of October?
Well, it's in Forsyths' hands.
Yeah.
We've provided the information to them.
Yeah.
It's not in our hands.
Yes, except for those 20 receipts.
That's correct.
So are those, so it's only 20 receipts or so?
I don't know the
Roughly.
number, but it's roughly.
And is that likely to hold up the whole process?
Well, we hope not, because we have to come to a point where if we get down to half a dozen invoices, and that's a very small amount of money, does that hold up the audit process? That's a decision for the audit office and for Forsyths. It's out of our hands.
I had a phone call with Forsyths late last week. Jake, the auditor, said that they were still waiting on a number of documents and that he didn't think they would have them by Christmas.
Can't comment on that because what sort of don't have this conversation?
Well, the ones we've been talking about, so invoices of things, but contracts as well.
They've had all the contract information that they've asked for.
Well, he's told me late last week they were still waiting on contracts.
That's actually
Contracts and transactions and stuff like that. So, you know.
So how much blame shifting is going on here with the whole system? I mean, you talked with the auditors, you had 3 in the room, didn't you, more or less, or on whatever?
for the audit office.
Yeah.
There were 3 members of the Forsyths team and 4 members of the audit office.
Plus NEWA.
What's not
So there's representatives from 3 different organisations. How did the auditor's office blame?
They're not into blame. They're just saying flat
Accountability.
That's right. They're saying that
Blame is the wrong word.
NEWA's responsibility to deliver the controls in place before the audit office can sign off on the financial statement.
That's true.
And that's a fact.
But there was misgivings down here as well. Did they accept that, or they just threw it back in NEWA's hands to sort it?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Well, your accountants down the road here have been missing a few things. And I suggest the accountants that, and you know how accountants work, you've got, people there that are, paper boys or bookkeepers or whatever you want to do, and they do a lot of this work.
Yeah,
don't they?
what they call juniors, yeah.
Absolutely, and that's probably what happened. In this case, I don't know. I'm only surmising,
Yeah.
and it might happen again. So moving on, do you think we're in a position now that we can get away from the probably a damaging interim audit report? Its final report through, do you think we'll do it?
Yes, I don't know the timing of it, but yes.
You say it's in their hands now.
Well, it is. It's because they have to satisfy themselves with all the information that's been presented to them and everything that they've been able to ascertain from our financial records, whether that allows them to form an opinion that the statements accurately reflect the operations of the council.
And then we have a statement coming out over here that's sort of what's going on here. That's what I said straight away since I heard that.
So,
Jack was very pessimistic.
Well, there was an audit clearance meeting supposed to have been convened yesterday, so General Manager, what's the update on
No idea.
that? This
what's
is.
the- can you tell?
I don't even know what the question means. What's an audit? What's an audit clearance?
Sorry, the engagement, there's an engagement timetable.
Yes.
Engagement
Yes,
thing, and on the 18th of September, the audit clearance meeting was to be convened.
yes. Well, it wasn't.
And so, as it's an engagement between yourselves and the auditors, do you not, do you have, I guess, you don't have, you're telling me that you don't have an understanding of why that meeting wasn't held yesterday?
No,
Which is the audit.
Do you have it?
Please, no.
no, we know nothing about
So
it.
you're just going
The other
to
thing-
are we going to sit here and wait? I understand what you're saying, Laurie, that you feel that they've been provided with everything they need to do to move forward, and you don't know why they're not moving forward. They seem to have their own reasons for not moving forward.
They say that-
And the two parties aren't coming
They
to.
say, I don't, it's just, I'll just be blunt, as far as I'm aware, they're saying that they're waiting on further information from here and they can't move forward without it.
So would it be that you guys need to contact them again?
Well, we
and ask
have
them
been
what
doing
it
this.
is?
We communicate.
We're in constant contact with them.
Okay, so that's, yeah, because if there's a breakdown with communication,
Yeah.
you know,
I don't
one
think it's
person
a
wrote one thing.
communication.
Well, they must be with this audit clearance meeting, isn't it?
The audit clearance meeting is a scheduled event in every audit engagement plan. And it relies on all of the bits and pieces leading up to that to be done. So when this plan was scheduled back in March, April initially,
Yeah.
there would have been an expectation that that would have been the date that they had put into their calendars as the date we would have the clearance meeting.
In other
Clearly,
words,
since
if it's been supplied and they say it hasn't, and you'll say,
Well,
And the
No, I
audit-
didn't say everything has been.
And the audit engagement plan is a standard part of their process that happens to every council.
yeah, we know.
Glen Innes would have got one, Uralla would have got one, Armidale would have got one, NEWA got one, etc. Everyone got a letter saying, here is our engagement plan. Why do they detail the engagement plan? To justify their fees. That's what the engagement plan is. Well, we think we're going to have to do all of this work and we think it's going to cost us $26,000. That's what that document is all about. It's a quote. In any other business, it's a sort of a quote for, here's our quote of what we want done.
We're sort of like a barrel, aren't we? Because they hold the hand in terms of the
Well, they do.
legislation.
They do, and.
Yes, because they're a monopoly.
Yeah, I know, it's all very unfair, but the fact is,
Yep.
it's the reality that we live
The
with.
timing is partly my problem. And I mentioned I had many others to do, and they were engaged, they were priorities for my business before I took this role on.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm not in a position to say I drop everything else to do this. I have to do it in the order in which I'm progressing every single one of them.
Yeah.
And that's not as quick as it would otherwise have been if you had a single CFO here who was focused entirely on that work. It would have been done a lot earlier. But I just physically do not have the capability to drop everything and do this because it's an issue raised by the auditors.
Once you
I'm
get
well
these
aware
new
of
things
this.
in place, should become a bit.
Well, it is now much easier to find anything. It's much easier to identify where something belongs. It's much easier to make sure that bank reconciliations are done. All those things that are part of day-to-day business operations, they're all being carried out correctly. It's the historical stuff that we're dealing with, and that's what takes time.
Yeah.
It's chasing records and
By
finding
what
information.
Yeah.
we need now is a bookkeeper in here. Well,
Well, you definitely need some resources, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tim is appointing somebody. I think you're interviewing for that.
Yes,
But again, it's finding the right people to do it.
Yeah.
we
That's right.
found someone and
We
it
thought that was.
added to our problem. It didn't assist it. So we're very tentative about, you know, who we take on. We want to make sure that the person can actually do the job. Yeah. Which is why we engage. You remember the conversation we had with Joel Weir, etc. The reason we engaged Roberts and Morrow was we thought, well, if we put it in the hands of chartered accountants, while we get the transition to zero underway or completed, while we get on top of all of this, that's the best way to go. That is
Somebody voting somebody.
no,
You're voting.
I'm trying to get rid of it. Yes, you know, it's water under the bridge. There's nothing we can do about it. I made an assumption that, you know, that certain things would happen because of organisational reputation.
may I make one little suggestion?
Yeah.
I'm probably right outlined here, and I don't know the right way to do it, but say you get your interview down to 2 or 3 or whatever
Yeah.
you're about doing, and you're thinking seriously about one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I have to.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, say from Armidale.
Yep.
Would it be proper, me being from your own, it wouldn't make sense, but you've got people here from Armidale,
Yep.
discuss with the councillors, we think about, do you know anything about such?
Yeah.
You're allowed to do that?
Yeah.
That's what I'd say.
I don't have any problem. Look, I don't. Laurie and I are
We should
both
really be stepping into operations.
doing our best to move NEWA forward on many fronts,
We know.
of which this is one of them, etc. Yeah, I won't say it.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it. So we're doing the best we can. We're working humongous hours to achieve the
I'm just thinking
result.
here of some responsibility,
Yes.
if it fell over.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to say.
But you've got to have the right people to do that. You've got to have the person in place that you can say, right, I trust you to go and do that work. This is the instruction I give you.
Mm.
I need to have that done, and you trust that it's actually going to be done.
Well, that's where the service level agreement comes into place and someone actually managing. It's no different to the build up of the road. If you're not managing Nick, it's going to fall apart and it's only to his benefit and otherwise, and we're going to get out of front. So we all contract with each other to do this. As I'm sure you are now contracted to deliver certain things. I agree it's in the past. These are observations that will come out in the report, and the auditors are going to say, what are your comments on that and how have you fixed it, and we'll be testing that in the future. And that's all I can say is that the exuberance of trying to fix things is going to come out as a wash.
They may not come out. We have been given no indication so far that we would get a qualified audit report. We have been asked, do we want an extension beyond the 31st of October? And rightly or wrongly, Laurie has said, no, we think we won't need an extension. You know, we are better than we were last year and we'll be significantly better next year. But at this stage, we got our interim audit figures, which were in fact the year-end audit figures, out, you know, within 3.5 weeks of the end of the financial year. And that was because auditors, as you know, they stack up clients. And what they do is they pick on the little ones first and they say, oh, we'll knock them over, that'll be good. And then they move along, you know, all their clients, Bigleninus and Armidale and what have you. What happened with us was they said, oh, well, we want to start you on this day and finish you on that day. They actually started 2 weeks late and then started jumping up and down because they weren't finished on the day that they were committed to go and do someone else's audit. So a lot of the squealing is
Their own fault.
well, not their own fault, but they're squealing because it's upsetting their nice little neat program of, oh, on Monday we start with Uralla and 2 Mondays from then we do Walker and what have you. And, you know, you always have to justify that. Oh, well, the reason is because when the audit office say what's going on, oh, well, you know, New England Weeds Authority are holding us up. They didn't say that their audit manager was off sick for 2 weeks and did absolutely nothing. And the questions that we're being asked to answer, we were getting, you know, after the time that we were given to answer them. We hadn't even got the question. Not making excuses, I don't care. All I'm interested in is outcomes, and that is getting the audit finished, getting it done successfully, and getting on with things. And at the same time, trying to build a building and do a few other things, recruit some staff.
Now, just to sort of summarise this, we've got a timetable here, and as these things happen, would you be able to let the councillors know that they've happened so that we can keep track of the progress?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. And we probably don't need a motion to do that. You've just said that you're going to do it.
You've got to do it anyway.
Yeah. Right?
Never remember his questions.
Yeah, then so do you want to, well, that was the previous meeting, so you can pass that on. That other resolution from the.
Well, we obviously went at the previous meeting.
Yes.
We don't know.
But the minutes have to be.
Yeah, I mean.
Yep.
Scott Councillor Kermel will provide you with the minutes of that meeting.
Nothing very surprising. It's really the subject of this
Yeah,
conversation.
I mean, this was really well, we needed this
Yes.
conversation
To
to.
close the resolutions from
Yeah.
that meeting.
Yeah,
Off the subject.
But
Listen.
it's still recorded as
Yeah,
well.
that's fine.
But I can.
No, you can record this all the way, louder the better. There are a few weeds being taken off the Weeds Authority, is that correct?
It's been reprioritised.
There's been, well, here we go. Oh. These are the priority weeds and these are the non-priority weeds.
St John's
And
Ward.
you'll see that St John's Ward has come off, but others have gone on. So Broome has gone on and St John's Ward has come off,
Yeah, well,
etc.
That's very comforting.
That,
yeah.
however, and Privet has come off.
Yeah.
Okay,
What's
however.
the implication for that, the landholders?
Okay, but the implication is, and I'm not an expert on weeds, but remember that's a New South Wales priority weeds list. And whilst St John's Wort may not be an issue in Bathurst, it definitely is an issue in Lara's part of the world
and here.
and here. So it doesn't mean, oh, well, it's off the list, that's okay. We don't do anything about it. We still have a thing called a GBD, General Biosecurity Directive, which requires us to still manage noxious weeds. We're trying not to use the word noxious anymore for some reason, but we still have an obligation to manage.
Why aren't you allowed to use noxious?
I don't know.
Is that a male, female thing? You're not allowed to call a bloke a bloke. I mean, you've lost me.
Well, it's not clear.
However, some weeds have come off and some weeds have been added on, but don't jump to the assumption that because a weed has come off.
So if someone says, is St John's Ward taken off?
If you want us to stop spraying St John's Wort and Privet, happy days.
Yeah,
No,
no.
I mean, I'll give you a micro block of
Yeah.
5 acre block, and it's, well before I got there, it's just covered in St John's Wort, and I have to control it all year round, but October's a bad time, and right through to Christmas. And if I don't, and I've had engagement with your office about my little 5 acre block,
Yeah,
that's
Yeah.
it's okay. I mean, not working,
Yeah.
like get the slasher out.
yeah. And
If I don't have to
it
do
doesn't
this,
help
that's
to
fine.
communicate that to our priority, to our constituent councils, because then I get people from Armidale Regional ringing me up saying, well, we need a refund. And I had this discussion, Laura, as you heard the other night of saying, well, you need to sort of understand how the whole funding works. It isn't a pay for service. It isn't money that is paid to spray weeds, etc. So we're having to have those discussions now because, you know, Armidale Regional Council's been told they're being charged too much.
There's nothing to stop any LCA, though, like Control Authority, from submitting individual weed management plans to the state. And the reason you would do that is that you've got, well, say you rel, for instance, you don't have Chilean needlegrass. And say, for instance, that Chilean needlegrass comes off the priority list because it's so prevalent in the rest of the state, but your Alleroy it doesn't have any. So it makes common sense. You don't want it just because the rest of the state's got it. So you would submit your biosecurity officer, if they're doing their job, would submit an individual weed management plan to the state and generally get that. Now it's an easy policy, you can get that peer reviewed. So they'll submit that to a couple of other LCAs and they'll go, yep, looks good. And then it becomes a priority for your area. So you're still justified in treating it and can still be taken through your treated under the Biosecurity Act as a priority weed would be.
Just that our councils would be asking, so is this been taken off the noxious weeds list?
Priority, yeah.
Priority.
But it's gone down it, but that doesn't mean you can just let it run free.
Does that mean they're going to drive past us? What's something else?
This was,
No,
yeah.
I've got an offset.
Right, so I'm going to submit a report on this. So I've got to be accurate in what I say about St John's Fort.
Yeah.
Well, St John's Fort is no longer a priority weed. Okay, now
That'll move on.
and that has some.
Well, you can still tell them they're going to be dealt with.
Yeah, but that has some implications because we can't give directives and legal enforcements and things because it's no longer a priority weed. So we can't take them to court and sue them for not dealing with it.
So a property in your relevance just yellow with 5,000 acres, I would say.
Yes.
No, they're right, are they?
No, that gets us into another area. If it's, as Councillor Kerno says, it's totally infested, when we go to discuss that with DPO, they say, oh, it's a lost, it's too late, it's a lost fight. It's one that's taken over, we're never going to get rid of it. Okay, so that's if it's a massive infestation. But if it isn't a massive infestation, we then work with the landholder to say, it's not a priority weed, but we still need to manage it and get rid of it. We need to, first of all, control it and secondly, eradicate it. And
you don't have to eradicate it, but it can't be seen as an infector of the land around it.
That's what I was going to say, it's all the neighbours.
yes,
Yeah.
and
You can't let it run free. They can take what measures are necessary to stop the spread.
So can you enforce, if say you've got that total infestation to the west of that, all of that country, can you enforce a buffer zone on the perimeter to protect?
yeah, well, that's where we would go to DPI and say, what do you want us to do
Right,
and how do you want us to do
it's
it?
very important for all of
Where you submit the
And-
individual weed management plan
Yeah, and
as an LCA.
as Councillor Gresham would know, we have this in Glen with Dear Winson, who's got a highly infested property. And the neighbours are basically complaining and saying, well, what are you doing, etc., etc., etc. So we're trying to work with her to create a buffer zone around her fence lines first, to say, okay, it's not affecting the neighbours because we've got a 30-metre buffer zone, and then we start sort of moving inbound. But because it's no longer a priority, we can't enforce legal action in that particular case.
Explain it then.
Yeah.
So I've got just a question before we move on. Why is there no video recordings, or why have they been removed since November last year?
They haven't been removed.
Well, they're not on the
Recorded,
website.
no. Correct. just answer the question. They haven't been removed. They were recorded. They were recorded by, I hate to say it, they were recorded by Emma, but unfortunately she didn't save them.
Yeah, but some of them have been removed. Some have been removed. I spoke to other weeds officers at the state weeds meeting, and they said, "Why have the video recordings been removed?" He said, I used to watch them, and they've gone. So some may not have been uploaded. I understand that,
Yes.
but some have been taken down.
Well, I can't answer it because I didn't take them
Yeah, 12
down.
months. That's right. But it's since November last year.
We can check this out on the web archive. Usually they
Yeah.
get.
Mm.
And
The website is managed by, I forget, Waterfall Way
the ones
graphics or something like that, so we can ask David as to,
David War, is it?
no, not David Ward,
no.
I know that David too.
But I mean, the August minutes.
Yes.
And gender up, but the video's not.
Yes,
Yeah,
I don't think we did a video for August.
yeah, no, we didn't. We just did our audio recording.
Yes.
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Now I have,
This minute,
just so you know, I have been working with RMT, which is different to Roberts and Morrow, it's Roberts and Morrow Technology, to look after the recording of meetings. And this is going to be the first one where they're going to take it through the process of taking it from here and putting it on the website. So that'll then become a standard process and procedure to ensure that meetings are recorded and reflected on the
so if we've recorded the August one,
Boys.
in voice, it should be here in voice.
it should, and at the moment it's not in my hands, it's in the hands of someone else, because that's not technology that I'm familiar with, and B, I don't have the time.
Someone else.
Roberts and Morrow Technology. I've had a meeting with them to go through this whole thing, and they're coming back to me with a solution to making sure we don't have that problem again.
Yeah, it is an obligation under the Act.
Yes,
So we have just a note about that, put that on the agenda for the next meeting. Just to sort of update us on what's happened.
Well, there's still the unresolved question of what's happened. Councillor Commode is saying that we don't have the full 12 months set up on the web, and you are saying that's not the case. So
no, I'm saying none to the best of, well, I haven't taken any down, nor have I instructed anyone to take any down. I will ask the website controller if he has decided out of a thought bubble to take some down, but but more than that, and what isn't there isn't there. Sorry, I can't work miracles.
they don't
Yeah, as long as
They don't exist anymore. They did exist. I've got records of them. I can see, I can show you in Teams now. I can go in and look, and it'll say, you know, recording of the blah, 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 blah. And when you click on it, it says expired. So it's gone.
well, or maybe RMT might be able to get some of them back.
No.
You never know. They've confirmed that.
We've had that discussion. Yeah.
Well, there's nothing we can do, but there's nothing we can do, but if we just have a little note about it for the next meeting, that'll be great.
I'll give you an update on what the procedure will be in future.
Thank you. So is there any, well, let's go out of, I'll just have a motion to go out of,
so moved.
unsuspending standing orders. So all in favour?
Yeah.
Is there any other business? Any other matters of urgency? We've got a date for the next meeting, Tuesday, the 21st of November. So
Jim's still good with that? Yeah.
at 1 o'clock. Okay, if there's no further business, then I will close the meeting at 2:39 p.m. Thank you for your attendance.
21st, yes.
1 p.m.
Okay. I'll just switch it off.
Good luck with the auditors. You can't beat it, you've got to.
Well, that's not.
You can be, but you just got to humour them.
Words.